really facing a dilemma, and we're going to be talking about that tonight. They either raise payroll taxes or they allocate funds between the retirement program and the disability program, which is what they've done for 11 times in the past, or they cut monthly beneficiary checks by 20% in 2016. They must do this. This is not an if. They are out of money on the disability side. Now, is this something they all of a sudden were hit with? Absolutely not. As I'll share with you tonight, I spoke with the chief actuary for the Social Security Administration in Washington, D.C. last March, and he clearly said, we warned them 20 years ago, and he said, our projections actuarially are right on target. And we told them they were either going to have to reallocate or allocate money differently between the two funds, or cut benefits, or raise payroll taxes. And of course, neither party wants to raise payroll taxes. So we're going to be talking about all of that tonight, and unfortunately, it's not a good time, if there ever is a good time, to be disabled. What the government is doing to the disabled right now, in my opinion, is an absolute travesty. There's a lot of myths, there's a lot of rumors, and there are a lot of lies out there propagated by the Social Security Subcommittee on Social Security and picked up by the media, and also propagated by the media because many outlets such as National Public Radio and so on, who have been extremely hard on the disabled, get their funding from Congress. And so therefore we have this, I guess I'm a conspiracy freak or something, but I like to think of this big vast complex between the government and the media. So let's get started. We've got a lot to cover tonight, a lot to talk about. We'll see how far we get, and then we'll take a little break, okay? Oops. There we go. Well, first of all, the first part of the program is going to cover slides that have been provided for me by the Social Security Administration. This thing has gotten so far out of hand, and the lies and the myths and the rumors, that the Social Security Commission this past June had to put out a PR program to try to dispel the lies. There's a great article that I can refer you to. You can get it online. It's in U.S. News. It's an opinion done by a Chad Stone, August the 22nd, 2014, and it's entitled "The Myth of Out of Control Disability Benefits." And he does an excellent job of dispelling the myth. It's all, for the most part, a lie. And we're going to be talking about the details. The reason the Social Security program has grown in the last 20 years, and this is directly from the chief actuary at the Social Security Administration, the big guy. Population growth. Aging of the baby boomers. People tend to become more disabled as they get older, with the exception of perhaps something like brain injury that may occur when they're younger, diving into a river, some accident, that kind of thing. More women in the labor force. In fact, interestingly, if one looks at the demographic factors, they'll see that nearly the same amount of men as the same amount of women are on Social Security disability. The men slightly more. And the rise in the Social Security full retirement age. Remember when people could retire at age 65? Well, you can only retire at age 66 now if you're born up through 1951. And beyond that, it increases even more, 66 and 3 months, 66 and 6 months, depending when you were born. So stretching the full retirement age out has caused more disability problems. Because people, as I mentioned, do get more disabled as they're more susceptible to becoming disabled as they get older. And so by stretching that full retirement age out, it tends to gather in people that were not they never calculated would be involved in the disability program. So you see, full retirement age, disability payments stop. And they put you on the retirement sector, or the retirement part of the Social Security Trust Fund. Now, you get to keep the higher of the two payments, so it's kind of a good deal in a sense, but they take you off disability. You're no longer disabled to them. You are now full retirement age if you're 66 or beyond. And so, at one time, as you're probably aware, when the program first was signed into law in 1937 by President Franklin Roosevelt, the full retirement age to draw, they had no disability at that point, was age 65, and of course it remained that way for many, many years. Well, I understand from a government mortality table in 1937, the life expectancy for a male worker, and that was made up primarily the workers, the women tended to be moms, stay-at-home moms, housewives, and so on in those days. The life expectancy for a male worker at that time was age 60. So there is speculation that Franklin Roosevelt and Congress never expected anyone to draw a nickel. In fact, it's been kind of called a scam to get America, give them some feeling of security coming out of the Great Depression. Now, whether that was true or not is immaterial, because here we are today. And we've got a big government spending, and going after the little people as usual. Now, the faces and the facts of disability, I want to share that with you first. To qualify, the disabled person must have a recent work history. So to obtain Social Security disability benefits, one must have worked 5 out of the last 10 years steady before they became disabled, or they run out of insured status. It's like paying insurance premiums. You don't pay your premium, you don't collect. So for example, if a person stops working in 2005, they have to prove disability, the severity of the disability, by 2010, or they are no longer insured. And I do get that frequently. They stop work, they stay at home for a number of years, then all of a sudden they have some kind of an injury, and they're no longer insured for Social Security disability. Now, let me make sure I'm clear tonight. The original slide talks about Social Security and Supplemental Security Income, SSI. Social Security Disability Income, SSDI, of course, Social Security has an acronym for everything, and sometimes I believe their favorite acronym is NO. So in this particular case, we are talking about Social Security Disability Income tonight. SSI is federal welfare. It is under the Medicaid system of the United States of America, and the money that is paid out in benefits is paid out of the Treasury of the United States of America, not out of the Social Security Fund. Where the confusion lies is the fact that Social Security administers the SSI program, but it is not Social Security. It is welfare. For people who have not worked enough, they ran out of insured status, as I was talking about, or they were a stay-at-home mommy all their life and never worked, or they were a disabled child and had never had the opportunity to work, so they're not going to be insured for regular Social Security. So when one gets SSI, of course, they get federal Medicaid, or as we call it in California, Medi-Cal. Medi-Cal is welfare medical aid. On the Social Security disability side that you pay in and earn, you get a Medicare card. Even if you're 20 years old, you get a Medicare card with that once you've been on benefits for 2 years, because it's not welfare. Somebody paid taxes to earn Social Security disability and Medicare. SSI, Now, if a person is younger, 18, 20 years old, there are special rules that do apply as to their insured status for regular Social Security, and here they are. If they're before age 24, then they only have to have 1.5 years of work in a 3-year period before becoming disabled. If they're 24 to 31 years of age, they must have worked half of the time since they were 21. And age 31 and older, now we're talking 5 out of the last 10. That is, they must have worked 5 out of the last 10 years before the disability began. Otherwise, they are not covered. I get calls frequently. People either, as I mentioned, either stay-at-home mommy or they stopped working a long time ago and say, look, I paid in the system. I worked for 20 years. I put money in there. Yeah, but disability is different than retirement. See, to retire, you only have to have the 10 years in during your lifetime. You work 10 years, or they call it 40 quarters, and make enough money to during those quarters, which isn't a lot. It's only about $5,000 a year. So you work 20 quarters, 5 years out of the last 10 to get Social Security disability. But for retirement, you only need the 10 years in. You could get your 10 years in by the time you're 30, 31 years old, never work again, be a stay-at-home mommy, and you would be insured for full retirement age. You wouldn't get a big check, but you would get a check at age 62 or 66 or beyond, depending on your full retirement age. Now, benefits are calculated based on your entire history. All the money that you have paid into the Social Security system during your lifetime by working. And of course, the money you pay in, if you look on a paycheck, you will see deductions for FICA. Those are the Social Security taxes, FICA, okay? The FICA taxes. And that goes to the Social Security Administration Trust Fund. And that's where you pay in those Social Security taxes. I had a sheriff who came to me in my San Mateo office about a year ago. And he wanted to talk, and it was a great claim, a terrible back problem, over 50, 55 years of age. I mean, just a great claim on the surface, but he wasn't insured for Social Security, even though he'd worked steady, because the city and county of San Francisco, at least the sheriff's department, does not pay into Social Security. There are certain groups that are exempt. For example, federal workers, they have their own disability program, and so on. You always hear about Congress's perks. Well, that perhaps is one of them, I'm not sure. Now, who are the disability insurance beneficiaries? There are nearly 9 million people on Social Security disability today. Well, when you consider there's something like, 308 or 318 million in the country, not that big of a percentage, yet people in the radio, television, columnists, the politicians, they would have you believe that everybody's on disability. When you have the chair of the Social Security Subcommittee in April of 2012 publicly in a Social Security Subcommittee meeting in the Rayburn Building in Washington, D.C., say the following: most people who are applying for Social Security disability are nothing more than a bunch of con artists. That's what we're facing today. And that is going through all through the Congress. And I'm going to tell you toward the end here tonight about my personal meeting with Congressman Xavier Becerra, the ranking member of that committee, this past March, along with the chief economist for the Senate Finance Committee, both of the chief staffers from both the majority and the ranking parties of that committee, and it is not a pretty picture. Now, who are the disability beneficiaries? Well, it's a pretty diverse group, actually. You see the percentages there on the slides, the mental impairments, the board here, if I can reach it. Let me pull it over one way or the other. Let's see how far I get here. Oh, the slide's a little bit too close, so you can't see the number, but the number on the left under mental impairments is 31.4% of disability worker beneficiaries and 35.2% of all disabled beneficiaries, and that could be, by the way, survivors, surviving children, and so on a parent's account. Because remember, there are survivor benefits with Social Security disability. When you work actuarially you pay for those survivor benefits. That could be a young child if the parent becomes disabled or dies or retires on the Social Security system, that kind of thing, or a disabled child found disabled prior to the age of 22. So we're not just talking about some old guy that got hurt, at age 60 on the job. We're talking about all Social Security disability benefits, beneficiaries. So about 35% of all beneficiaries, including the kids and the other survivors, receiving benefits are based on significant intellectual disabilities or severe illnesses, mental illnesses. 8.3%, or is it 9? Yeah, 9.3% of the disabled workers, 9.4% of all beneficiaries, are receiving benefits based on nervous system and sense organ impairments. And then about 30% are receiving benefits based on musculoskeletal and connective tissue issues and impairments. I will tell you, my perfect client, well, presumably perfect, is a disabled iron worker, age 55 or above, with a bad back. That is probably the easiest case to get on Social Security. Social Security today has gone more and more away from approving younger people, period, under the age of 50, and they've gone farther away from approving people with mental problems. And of course, I don't have to share with you that if you are a brain injury survivor or caregiver or provider, how difficult it is for someone like a judge to determine your disability when they have no idea what brain injury is like. You walk in there, you look just as normal as everybody else. But you get a quarter of an inch below that surface, and the whole world goes down the toilet. And that's generally what happens in most brain injury cases. So, to give you a little picture of who's collecting. Now, this is interesting. 1 in 5 males and 1 in 7 females will have died within 5 years of receiving benefits. And I have to tell you, I've been doing this, Dr. Stephanie said a long time. I've been doing this my 19th year. And I've had many people over the years either die by their impairments or a few that have taken their own lives. One in particular, I recall, Social Security doctors looked at him, the psychiatrist, who got $67.50, by the way, for the full exam and writing the report or dictating the report. And he said there really wasn't anything wrong with the guy. He was mildly depressed. 5 days later, the guy took his life. I call that a little more than mildly depressed. The average person collecting Social Security disability nationally gets $1,146 a month. We're not talking about, in spite of what Congress has said and promulgated, people are not getting rich on Social Security disability. And of course, if a person is on SSI, the welfare side, the maximum in California you can get this year is $889, and $156 of that is cash to replace food stamps. So you don't even get food stamps. Nobody's getting rich on disability. No one. And that's a major lie being promulgated by Congress. That's $264 a week, $37 a day. You can't eat at McDonald's hardly for $37 a day. And especially if one lives in this valley, or probably anywhere in California for that matter. So even with disability, 1 in 5 beneficiaries live in poverty, and most are low income, which is 200% below the poverty level, federal poverty level. More than 12% of the workers are poor enough that they also qualify for SSI. And more than 45% of the disabled workers and 49% of all disabled beneficiaries receive less than $1,000 a month. Total gross. So, it's a really unfortunate situation And I guess that's why I'm so passionate and, quite frankly, upset about what's going on when they start targeting the weakest of those in our population. Vice President Hubert Humphrey, back in 1968, I believe it was, said the measure of a country, and I'm paraphrasing slightly, I'm too old now to remember the exact quote, but he said the measure of a country is how we treat the weakest of our society. And that's something that's always stuck with me because it is so true. Well,
why has it gone so bad?
Well, just stick with me, friend. We're going to talk about that. Why? The question was, why has it gone so bad, was the exact question. And stick with me, and we're going to talk about that. So let's talk about some more slides here. What's going on? The Social Security Act defines disability very strictly. Because of what's been going on in Congress, today, I cannot accept representation on probably a third of the people that I could have 3 years ago. It's impossible to get them approved. Doesn't mean they're not impaired significantly. It's just that the Congress has put so much pressure on the administration to turn people down that they have then put a lot of pressure on the judges. And so I suspect, although I've never heard anyone say this or admit to it publicly, I suspect everybody's running around down there trying to protect their jobs. I had a case that was a fully favorable bench decision issued November the 2nd, 2014. This individual was very significantly impaired. The judge issued and did us a favor and issued what's called a bench decision. So the lady did not have to wait for 3 months for the decision writers to write the full 20, 30-page judge's decision. We were able to get it done with basically a one-page decision. Well, the administration's computers spotted that because the lady was under the age of 50. She was 47, a younger individual, which makes it really tough to get benefits anyway, and a bench decision, and they grabbed that faster than a person could read it. They held it for 60 days, or close to it, at the Appeals Council, trying to determine if the judge made the correct decision. And the judge, I never feared that the case would be overturned or remanded. It was a very strong case, terribly impaired back problem, major, on methadone, morphine. I mean, just horrible situation. I would not want to be in that position at any age. Well, they waited 60 days because Social Security has 60 days of what's called an own motion review to pull the case and look at the judge's decision. Then they found no fault with it apparently and sent it on to the back to the field office and on to the payment center. The bottom line is November 2nd to January the 21st today, give or take, that's about 60, going on 90 days here in another week or so. And the lady can't even get an idea from the field office when she might get her money. Today she went down there again, and they said, hey, look, we've got as much time as we want to take. So I told her tomorrow to go down to her congressman's office and knock on the door and see the staff member who handles Social Security complaints. Every congressman in the United States House of Representatives has a staff member in their district office that handles Social Security. As I understand it, that's the #1 complaint they get at their local field office, district office, and see if they can speed them up. Very little has been done. I personally have not been paid any of my withheld fees since the first part of November. I've not had a claimant paid their money since September. And these are fully favorable decisions issued. The oldest one goes back to August 29th, and she still hasn't received her money. And of course, I haven't been paid. So the bottom line is, I like to think of Ronald Reagan's statement when he said, big government isn't the solution to our problems. Big government is the problem. And that's what you get. And I will stand here before you tonight, and I'm going to tell you a lot worse things before the evening is over. But I happen to be a registered Republican. I am not very happy with them right now, and I never vote for anyone who wants more big government. I don't care what side of the aisle that they sit on. Because government is not the solution to our problem. It is the problem. Somebody at a federal office goes home at 4 o'clock. They don't care if you move into the hobo jungle or under the bridge. In fact, government workers, look, in fairness to Social Security, they are overwhelmed. There's over 1 million cases in backlog for hearings alone. They are overwhelmed. They are understaffed. They've had hiring freeze since 2010. And frankly, it's very difficult. And I do understand some of it to a degree. But that does not eliminate the problem of some poor soul who is starving to death moving under a bridge. I am very passionate about what I do and very passionate about helping disabled folks. And it really, you can see, it really steams me. I called the Speaker of the House's line last week, and I left a message, because they won't let you talk to them, of course. I left a message and said, you know what? I'm a registered Republican. I have been for 40 years, and I said, you're never going to get another nickel from me because of what you're doing to the disabled. And I'm going to give you all the details from my meeting with Congressman Becerra and the other folks in just a few minutes. Social Security payments are modest. We've talked about that, $1,146 a month. Disability is unpredictable, isn't it? Those of you, and I'm certainly not going to ask for a show of hands, but those of you who are disabled, whether you're receiving benefits or not, this wasn't something you wanted. It wasn't something you wished on yourself. Frequently, it's an injury, an accident. It happened. I once read a book back in the early 1980s when I was going through some difficult times in my life that a friend of mine gave me by Robert Schuller. Remember the guy from the Crystal Cathedral down in Anaheim? Hour of Power was his TV show. He wrote a book called Bad Things Happen to Good People. Sometimes you never figure out, how in the world did that happen to me? And then other times you look back on it and say, you know what? If that hadn't happened, this good thing would not have happened. Or if that hadn't happened, now I see probably why it happened. And then other times you're just befuddled. You never know why something like that happened to you. But you know what? That's life, and it is unpredictable. And disability is unpredictable. As experts projected for decades, the number of people qualifying for Social Security has increased. You got the population growth, as I mentioned, more women in the workforce, the graying of America, all of that stuff. That's where we are. It's not because this room is here tonight at SBI is full of a bunch of con artists. And as I mentioned, it is disability, it's insurance that you actually earn. You work and earn it, pay taxes for it. And Social Security, I have to tell you, they do work to prevent fraud. Now, one thing that's been promulgated by Congress and the media picks up on this stuff. One thing that has been pushed by them is that there's this terrible amount of fraud in the system. Hogwash. There have been 4, maybe 5 at the most, and that was never proven, but 4 verifiable incidents of fraud. Big time fraud I'm talking about. And that's it. And those were caught by Social Security field offices. The Inspector General, year in and year out since 1976, has said there's less than 1% fraud in the Social Security disability program. Less than 1%. Most people are basically honest. Some people do some dumb things, and I don't mean intentionally. They work and they forget, or they don't know, or they're injured enough where they don't report it to Social Security and they end up with an overpayment. You know, that's the common stuff, but that's not necessarily fraud. Fraud is when you actually set out to defraud somebody, to promulgate something that is untrue and get them to rely upon it. Okay? And year in and year out, the Inspector General of Social Security that inspects them independently, less than 1% fraud in the system. I doubt if I would get a show of hands, for obvious reasons, but I doubt if I'd get a show of hands tonight if I said, how many people here have defrauded the Social Security Administration, right? Well, I don't, if you did, I don't want to know about it. But anyway, the point being is that people don't. Now, what time do we have at the moment? How long have we been going?
6:30.
Okay, let's go a little bit more before we share in some of the things back there. I wanted to share with you the story of Senator Tom Colburn. You may know who Senator Colburn is. Senator Colburn served several terms in the United States Senate. He is from Oklahoma. He is a Republican. And he has done more against disabled people than anyone in Congress, in my opinion. He's the one that went into collusion with CBS 60 Minutes and painted everybody on Social Security disability as frauds. And we're going to talk about that and other places in the media. National Public Radio is a major one. Senator Colburn retired this year. I understand he has some serious health problems. He is, by the way, a physician by trade, MD. And, of course, MDs are known frequently not to like lawyers. So maybe that was the reasoning. I have no idea. But he introduced in December a bill called Senate Bill 3003 in the United States Senate before he left town. And this would change Social Security disability as follows. If a person is over the age of 62 and they are retirement recipients, because remember, you can take early retirement at 62. You have to take a 25% reduction in benefits to take it early. And if you're still working, you may end up paying it all back. But the fact is, you can take early retirement at 62 from the system. So his bill says if a person is over 62 and they're collecting early retirement, and they also are collecting or have collected disability or collecting disability, they cannot collect both benefits. And 20% of the recipients would lose this benefit. Now, what really got to me when I read this was this scenario, because the one I'm about to share with you is by far the most common, I think. I'll have someone come in the office who's 63 years old, clearly disabled. They didn't know what to do, and at 62, they took early retirement and had to take a full 1/4 reduction in their retirement check from what they would have gotten at 66 or whenever, okay? So we apply for disability. If they're approved, Social Security goes back and recasts those payments. In other words, they take back everything they paid them, and they give them the disability payment for that period, and they get the higher disability amount, which is going to be higher than a 62 amount usually, okay? So what that would do is that would disallow those people from getting paid disability during that period that they collected those age 62 benefits. So they're stuck, and I'm not sure if it wouldn't lock them in, unlike today, but unlock them in to the full 25% reduction for the rest of their life. I'm not sure what he meant by that. Ending of the medical improvement standard. Boy, is that one where he had to really egregiously go after the disabled. Today, if you're found disabled, they're supposed to review you every 3 to 5 years at a minimum. The judges now, to protect themselves, have been putting in suggestions or recommendations in their decisions that you should be reviewed at the end of a year to 2 years. They're trying to cover and protect their jobs, in my opinion. Now, that said, if you've ever had a disability review or someone you know has, they have to prove medical improvement to kick you off. That's the standard. In other words, there's significant medical evidence from your current record since the judge's decision or Social Security's decision that you have improved to the point where you now can work and are no longer significantly impaired. And most of those, of course, get appealed. And if you've got a good representative, frequently you will end up staying on benefits. But that said, he wants to end the medical improvement standard. So no longer would they have to say there's been medical improvement to be able to kick you off. I guess if they don't like you, they can kick you off, but here's the basis of it. Social Security disability benefits may be terminated if there is evidence that would be sufficient to support a finding and an initial determination that the individual is not under a disability and is able to engage in substantial gainful activity, essentially ending the medical improvement standard. Some bureaucrat decides you can work and make $1,090 a month. That is substantial gainful activity beginning 2015. In fact, let me just tell you, if you're making $1,090 a month, you are not disabled under Social Security law. I don't care if you're in a coma. Of course, that's earned income, not interest and dividends. Social Security doesn't care about that on regular Social Security. SSI they do, but not regular Social Security. So he wants to end the medical improvement standard so they can boot you. If medical improvement is expected, benefits end after 35 months. So that means a bureaucrat will say, I think there's going to be medical improvement. 35 months, you're gone, and you have to reapply and go through the 2 years of wait or more of waiting again. Right now, at the local hearing office, who's about as efficient as anybody, they're running their publicly published number is 12 months now, pretty much to a hearing. San Francisco, I've got 3 cases up there. They're running, published number is 16 months to a hearing. Now remember, they took somewhere between 10 months or 12 to turn you down at the first 2 levels. So by the time you get in front of a judge, you're now 22 months, 46 months away, into it. Then they've got so many they're turning down so many people at the initial levels now, more so than ever before, that the hearing offices are backed up and they're overwhelmed and they're overworked. And so therefore the decision writers, the staff attorneys who write the decisions for the judges are behind, way behind. And it's taking 2 to 3 months or more just to get the written decision after the hearing. So I tell people when they call me now, you need to understand that you're probably close to 30 months before you will see money. And then at 35, they can very easily boot you off. And then you have to reapply. Age would no longer be a vocational factor until age 54. So essentially, anybody under the age of 54, and then it rises to 55, anybody under 54, 55 would have to prove that they are so severe that they cannot do any of, or retain the capacity, I should say, to perform any of the unskilled sedentary jobs in the Department of Labor's Dictionary of Occupational Titles, which is the Social Security Bible. Now, to give you an example of those 137 jobs, let me give one that's dear to my heart, coming out of Sonoma County originally as an agricultural area and having worked in agriculture a little bit. Nut sorter. Not that kind of nut. I heard the Snickers. Nut sorter. That's where you sit at a conveyor belt with other ladies, regardless whether you're male or female, and you sort hazelnuts from walnuts. And unlike any other unskilled job, you get a sit-stand option because it has a stool. So if your doctor says that you can sit, but you got to stand up, change positions every 20 minutes or half hour, no problem, boy, you can be a nut sorter right now. It's unskilled. You do not have to know a thing the day you show up. Another one is surveillance system monitor. That's where you stare into the monitor, like in the airport or the bus depot. And vocational experts tell us that you don't need any arms, hands, legs, or ears to perform that job. I'm being a little facetious, but the fact of the matter is, these are unskilled, sedentary jobs. So what that means is under the age of 54, 55, you've got to prove you're as disabled and impaired as an 18-year-old under Social Security rules. That is, you are expected to make any adjustment necessary to any other unskilled, sit-down job. Big, big change. For example, fellow comes in, he's been an electrician, 50 years of age. The rule now currently changes at 50, 55, and 60. At 50, he comes in, he's been an electrician all his life. Last 15 years, they hold you to the jobs you've had the last 15 years. So what have you done the last 15 years, Joe? I've been an electrician. Heavy lifting, the whole bit. What's wrong with it? I got a bad back. Okay, all I have to prove to get him approved is that he can sit and do an unskilled, dumb job. And he will be approved. So he could be a nut sorter, but because of his closely approaching advanced age at 50, they give him a little break. Because as people get older, past the age of 50, obviously physically we have difficulties. And also, vocational experts tell us it takes 15 years to become an expert in a given field. And if a person is disabled at 50, even if they retrain into skilled work, there's not, with normal retirement being 65, 66, there's not time to become an expert again. So that's the reason for the breaks. And those are not just Social Security. I mean, that's Social Security, it's a well-known fact as we get older. It's harder to get to work and find work and so on and so forth. But understand, with Social Security, employability is never an issue. It does not make any difference if anybody would ever hire you. They think you got two heads, or all of the jobs that Social Security says you can do are located in Buffalo, New York. It's whether you retain the physical and mental capacity to perform that job as a nut sorter. Okay? That's a big, big change. Reconsideration eliminated, excuse me. First of all, currently we have the initial application. If you're denied, you can request reconsideration. If you are denied there, then you request a hearing before an administrative law judge. If you lose there, we go to the Appeals Council. Appeals Council lost, you go to the United States District Court, if it makes sense. And if you've got a nice socially impacting this problem or issue, you can take it on up to the Ninth Circuit of court. Now, that said, his recommendation or his bill would eliminate reconsideration. I don't know if that's all bad. Let me tell you what the numbers are. I'm interested this year in seeing what the new numbers will be. But in California, in the past, year in and year out, 33 to 34% of the people who apply are approved. At reconsideration, those who appeal, and only half the people, frankly, appeal. They get discouraged and go away. But of those who appeal, about 10 to 11, I think it was 11.7% last fiscal year, are approved. Only about 10% are approved at reconsideration of those who appeal. And at the hearing level, we have gone nationwide from close to 60% approval rate, average, down to, I think it's 48% this last fiscal year, and this year we're expecting it to be in the low 40s. To give you an example, judge down here is a great guy. I really like the guy. He always goes out of his way to come over and say hello and all that. He has a 35% approval rate. And others, some back east, have 19% approval rates. They approve 1 in 5 that come in front of them. But I doubt if the administration is interested in them. They're only interested in the ones who are approving 60% because of the pressure being put on them from the Congress. So I'm not sure that eliminating reconsideration is really all bad. Although once in a while I do get, I get somebody comes in, tried it on their own, denied, and I know kind of how to package it for reconsideration, and I'll get one once in a while, but it's still rare. So maybe it would save sometimes they went straight up to the hearing office. The problem is hearing offices are already just overloaded. And so if you eliminate reconsideration, because half of those people don't appeal for a hearing, if you eliminate reconsideration and you go up, I don't know how much more that would overload the hearing office. No evidence can be submitted within 5 days. So I guess if you go into a diabetic coma 4 days before the hearing and you die, you will not be allowed to submit that evidence. Which really, in my opinion, borders on constitutional rights, but, you know, I don't know. Okay. Must submit all evidence, even if does not support the disability. Well, I happen to be a person, I told the judges in Oakland last year, I said, you know what? I said, that statement we got from her treating doctor, it was horrible. Now, she paid the case, it turned out, that the doctor they called to testify at the hearing testified that this client of mine was not being treated properly at Highland Hospital. In fact, they were giving her medications that exacerbated her symptoms and her problems. So that anyway, the judge ended up paying the case, but I told her afterwards, privately, I just said, you know, I said, I submit it all, though, the good, the bad, and the ugly. There's a term the Social Security uses called similar fault. That's like where the representative and the claimant are in collusion to defraud the United States of America, and I'm never going to be in that position. Getting your case approved is not worth it to me if I have to lose my entire practice and maybe even end up in Leavenworth making little rocks out of big rocks. I'm not interested in doing that. In fact, I will tell you, if I have people come to my office, I'll warn you right now if you ever come to see me, and I'll say, when's the last time you worked? Well, I worked back in 11, but I've been working under the table. You know what I do? I stand up right there and I say, oh, no disrespect intended, this meeting is over, goodbye. There's the door. I say that. Because I will not be in collusion to defraud the United States of America. And that is fraud. Okay, Social Security attorney will be present at every hearing. So the proceedings, instead of being non-adversarial, will be adversarial. And Social Security will show up and they'll play Perry Mason with you, a lawyer. Where were you on the night of April the 15th? You really aren't disabled, are you? Cross-examinations. Perhaps, I talked to one of the judges, even maybe discovery, like in regular litigation, which means it'll be at least 5 years to get into a hearing, probably, with the depositions, like they have in workers' compensation and so on. Starting to get the picture? Well, I do have some good news on this guy in a minute. Fines and sanctions on the representative. They went after the representative big time. Part of that was because of Bender and Bender's tactics. As you probably know, Bender filed bankruptcy about 2 weeks ago. Chapter 11. In fact, I got a call from a fellow today that was referred to me by his trust and estates lawyer. Yeah, they filed bankruptcy. The ones that advertised on television all the time, the guy with the cowboy hat, Charlie Bender. So they were, I don't know if it was ever proven, in fairness to them, but they were alleged to have withheld evidence and stuff like that. And, you know, whether that's true or not, I don't know. It's history now anyway. But there are fine sanctions against the rep. And here's the biggie. The only thing we have left today in our arsenal is Social Security ruling 99-2P and the corresponding section of the Code of Federal Regulations. This is what we call the treating physician rule. No longer would that rule be in effect. The judge would be precluded, or the adjudicator, from giving weight to anybody. See, the idea behind that is your doctor sees you regularly, maybe he's seen you for 10 years even. Well, he should be given weight, provided his opinions are backed up by his record, because the Social Security doctor saw you for, what, 16 minutes, including dictating the report, or they're medical consultants hired by the state agency who never saw you and have passed judgment on you, whether you realize that or not. So the idea, and rightfully so, in the rules, is that, look, the guy that's treating you knows best. And more weight should be given to him as long as he's backed up. He can't, look, this, you know, my doctor cannot say Mel doesn't know his own name, unless Mel has traumatic brain injury, Alzheimer's, dementia, some reason in the record that I wouldn't know my own name. So he can't just be advocative in nature. It has to be backed up. But if it's backed up, they are to take his opinion over their own non-examining or 10-minute examiners. Well, he's doing away with that. So in no case can your doctor's opinion be given controlling weight. So essentially elimination of the treating physician rule. Malingering test. Oh, you love this one. He wants to allow the doctors to give you the malingering test, which Social Security, by the way, has outlawed because they're too unreliable. Malingering, a formal psychological testing. For malingering, background checks on the internet and all social media. I've got a bad back, and he wants them to be able to use that picture of you on your Harley. That may have been taken, by the way, 15 years ago. See, Social Security also outlawed that because you can't tell. If I look at your picture on the internet and it's on your Harley going to Nashville, I don't know when that picture was taken. So the commissioner, previous commissioner, Commissioner Astrew, he stopped the judges from doing that because they were doing that and using it to discredit the claimant so they could turn him down. And he stopped that. Well, Senator Colburn wanted to bring that back in. Elimination of the contingency fee, presumably. It's really unclear what he means, but he said the representative will have to account for all of his work. Well, that sounds like a fee petition. Okay, I spent 1 hour with the client. I spent 1.3 hours reviewing their file. I spent, right? Well, Social Security way back in the 70s, 1980, something like that, came out with the expedited contingency fee agreement. Make it simple on everybody, judges included. You come to me, we win, I get 25% of your back benefits. Real simple. You don't have to have any money up front to pay me. That's law. However, if they eliminate that, where they go by fee petitions only, there's a very good chance that that would eliminate the contingency, well, it would really eliminate the contingency fee agreement. So guess what lawyers and non-lawyers are going to be looking for? And how much cash do we have in the bank for the retainer? Now, I can't take your money as a retainer and actually spend it unless Social Security approves that fee. But I sure can take it and put it in a trust or escrow account pending approval by the adjudicator. So my guess is that it might, look, nobody knows. But I'm just telling you what the bill says. Review of the highest earnings representatives. This was specifically after Bender and Bender. I understand from a very reliable source that Charlie Bender and Harry Bender were taking $20 million a year each out of that operation. Yeah, lousy business, huh? I assure you I do not make that kind of money. No longer will the government pay attorney fees and costs under the Equal Access to Judgment bill, EJA, if you appeal to U.S. District Court and win. So you will have to pay your own lawyer, and I guarantee you, like any other court procedure, he's going to want some major big bucks in the trust account before he takes you up to U.S. District Court. So they're doing everything they can to suppress the disabled and make sure they can't get legal help. The Division of Quality Control for Social Security shall review all decisions by higher paying administrative law judges. A prophet of doom tonight, but these are dooming times, let me tell you. And in March of last year, I met with, as I mentioned earlier in the first half, with Xavier Becerra, the ranking member, the Democrat. He's congressman out of Los Angeles. He is the ranking member of the Social Security Subcommittee in the U.S. House of Representatives. I went with a small group from the National Association of Disability Representatives, that's NADER, and we went with our lobbyist, J.D. Moran, and we met with these folks, which included Congressman Becerra, the chief staffers from both the Republican side of the committee and the Democrat side of the committee, along with the chief economist from the Senate, the United States Senate Finance Committee. So everybody's in the ballpark here. You got the Senate, you got Congress. The biggest problem has been coming out of this Social Security subcommittee in the U.S. House of Representatives on the House side. In 2016, Social Security disability checks must be cut by 20% unless something is done. Must. I got will up there, but it's must be cut. The fund, that side of the fund, will be out of money in 2016. So the cut may not occur until 2017, but they will be out of money in 2016 in the disability portion of the Social Security Trust Fund. As I mentioned earlier, one of three things has to happen. Number one, they either cut benefit checks by 20% across the board, or they raise payroll taxes, or they reallocate funds, or allocate funds between the retirement and disability trust funds. Both funds would then be solved until at least 2033 if they did nothing else. I'm sorry? I'm sorry, what are you saying?
You have a installment at least 2013. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, that is a typo.
That's everybody edge.
I have a lady that is black. Well, she's still probably listening unless she got bored and went away from Baltimore, New York, Baltimore, Maryland, rather, who does some work for me on an outsourcing basis, and she is a reporter by trade. And shame on you, Lisa, for not catching that. I need somebody to blame, since I was the guy who put the slides together. Anyway, the correct answer, that is correct. Thank you for noticing that. I'm serious about that. Till at least 2033, not 2013, as the slide shows. Okay? Now, here is the rub. The Republicans want to cut benefits. Neither party wants to raise payroll taxes. And the Democrats want to reallocate the funds. Well, of course, we now have had in the House for the last couple of terms a Republican majority. So when this hits the floor, I imagine it will go very easily out to the floor eventually, strictly on a party line vote in that committee. As I mentioned, I was in that building, the Rayburn building in Washington last March with a small group from NADER. I was there actually speaking at the NADER National Disability Conference, and they had a Thursday afternoon little junket over to meet with this committee and these folks on Thursday at the Rayburn building. So, of course, I was right at my alley, so I tagged along. I'm sorry, you're having a wire problem. Bear with us just a moment. Thank you, Jerry. A little too rambunctious. It's all good. So we have to start all over again? Oh, okay. So I went on over, and we met, first of all, Congressman Becerra, a very likable fellow. I knew who he was. I'd met him casually before. He didn't know who I was. He spoke to us, and then I think you'll enjoy this little story. He said, anyone have any questions? Well, of course, I couldn't wait. So I said, yeah. He said, yes, sir. I said, yeah. When's your term up? And it caught him completely off guard because I said it that bluntly. And he stepped back and he looked at me and he started laughing. He says, December 31, why? And I said, well, are you going to run for re-election? He said, I sure am. And I said, well, the reason I asked that question is I'd like to support you. He said, oh. I said, look, Mr. Becerra, I said, you and I are on very different sides of the aisle. I said, in fact, I like to think of myself as a right-wing wacko. And he laughed. And I said, but the truth is, I'm like most people in this room. I'm pretty much middle of the road. I just happen to be a little bit to the right. And I said, my own party does not get it. They want to do things on the back of the weakest people in our country. And I said, you get it. Now, Congressman Becerra was a lawyer, is a lawyer, who represented mentally disabled people before he became a congressman. And he does get it. Now, you can agree or disagree with the Republican or the Democratic Party. I'm not here to talk politics, really. But I am here to say that what's going on in Washington is a travesty, in my opinion, what's going to happen. Because in addition to this, I suspect what's going to happen is parts of that bill, the good old Senator Colburn's parting shot to us, bits of that bill are going to end up in this, I suspect. I mean, just because I happen to be a political science junkie. You're going to have the, well, hey, we'll do this, but you got to do that, you know, and we might not get the 20%, we might get the allocation, but we're going to eliminate the treating physician rule, or we're going to eliminate the medical improvement standard, and so, you know, the usual thing in politics. I do not know. I cannot stand here before you tonight and tell you what will happen in the next year or two. I'm more like Noah. It's going to rain. And everybody said, but it hasn't ever rained before. Well, Social Security, according to Franklin Delano Roosevelt, said was to be something that would take care of us forever, our good shepherd. But unfortunately, in some parts of it, it has not turned out that way because it has been politicized. I mean, even Ronald Reagan back in the 50s, if you read that historical story, he was paid by the American Medical Association, of all people, to go around and hold what was called coffee klatches to discredit Social Security, because they believed that it was a form of socialism. And perhaps it is. But the fact of the matter is, it is here. I will also tell you what else Franklin Roosevelt said. He once said, I mentioned this when I was introducing Congressman Tom Campbell once. Because Tom Campbell, at least until a couple of years ago when he ran shortly for governor or Senate, he was the dean of the Haas School of Business at UC Berkeley. So as I was introducing him, I said, well, when I found out what Congressman Campbell was doing, I said I couldn't help but be reminded of FDR's famous quote. He said, an uneducated man will rob a train, but you give that man an education, and he will steal the whole railroad. And I thought Congressman Campbell was going to fall down laughing. He kind of liked that one. But the point is, this has to be done one way or the other. Now, do I think they're going to cut 20% benefits? They've got every disability organization and the consortium of people with persons with disability and everybody else down their throat right now. But they are so hell-bent for leather to go after the disabled that so far that has had absolutely no impact. It certainly didn't stop Senator Colburn before he left town.
So does that mean we're going to get charges lowered, or?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question, and I'll repeat it into the microphone for the other attendees.
Does that mean disabled people are going to have less to pay, or?
Well, the question is, would they have less to pay, disabled people? The answer is they would have less money to pay with if they lose 20% of their checks. Now, let me tell you what's been going on with National Public Radio, CBS 60 Minutes, and most all other media outlets. For many, many years, and even now to a degree, if I'm listening to a talk radio person or someone that I consider to be credible, I kind of sit there and I want to be entertained like everybody else. I like to watch Fox News and the pretty blondes. I like to be entertained. But the fact of the matter is, you can't just be entertained. You've got to do the fact-checking. Because what you see in the local newspaper or what you hear on the radio or on television is not gospel. My mother, to the day she passed away at the age of 83, believed if it was in writing, it was true without a shadow of a doubt. Check your own facts. Check what I'm saying tonight. Check your own facts. If somebody says to you there's fraud in the disability system, don't just swallow that. Say, excuse me, what evidence do you have of fraud? Oh, well, I've got this and I've got that. But generally, they can't even go that deep on you. They'll say, oh, well, I heard it on Fox News, or I heard it on CNN or some other outlet. Well, in June, a year and a half ago, the National Public Radio ran a hit piece, on the Social Security disability system. It was so egregious and so full of lies that all 8 of the past Social Security commissioners, Republican Democrats, signed a letter to the NPR president saying it was a complete falsehood. And her response? We stand by our story. And you know why? Where'd she get her money? There's one thing you can always count on in politics. Follow the money. And they get most of their funding, most all of it, from the taxpayers, from the Congress. Follow the money. Example number 2, CBS 60 Minutes in November of 12, and then again, I think this past June, I can't remember the exact months, I get a little foggy these days. They ran a piece and reran the same piece where they interviewed Tom Colbert. Only. They talked to no disabled persons, no disabled caregivers, no disabled providers, nobody at Social Security, only to Tom Colbert, who began to tell them about all this rampant fraud and how all of you sitting here today that are collecting Social Security disability or even SSI are nothing but a bunch of con artists. It was so bad that the next day, the Los Angeles Times, which isn't known to be a real conservative newspaper, they ran a headline that said, CBS should be ashamed. That's why I this is my personal, you don't have to take this for what it's worth. I'm not out here, beating up on 60 Minutes or NPR or anybody else, Republican or Democrat, really. I'm just annoyed at what I'm seeing. But that's why I'm very careful about any news show, period, any editorial comment, or even, for that matter, the straight news. In fact, I've kind of been watching OAN lately. Have you're familiar with that? It's a new cable channel that came on. It was formed by, I guess, a wealthy family in San Diego, pro-military, I might add, that got tired of hearing all the editorial comment. And it's a straight, good old-fashioned news. You don't have the handsome guys and the good-looking blondes, but you know what? You got straight news, if that's what you want. Unfortunately, it's not very entertaining, so you tend to turn it off after about 15 minutes. Because we like to be entertained. And but it's interesting if you haven't seen it. It's called OAN One America News. Well, let me give you a little summary here. The Social Security Disability Program is not out of control. That is a lie, a myth. And unfortunately, it has become more than just a rumor, while being untrue. And that's from the Social Security Chief Actuary. I alluded to this earlier, but I met with him also briefly in Washington last year at this conference. He actually spoke at the conference where that I was attending. And he said, there is nothing. It's just like this article I alluded to from U.S. News that I talked about. They quote him in here, in fact, I think. And he says, there is absolutely nothing that we didn't project 20 years before. Nothing. We told them at that time there would be more women, baby boomers are getting older, larger population. And then, of course, he said what's added to it, though, is the stretching of the retirement age. because you can get disability, see, up to full retirement age, so they've stretched that a little bit. But all this rampant fraud, it's hogwash, according to the real facts. And I'm not talking about some guy's writing. I'm talking about the chief actuary, the inspector general for Social Security. Get the facts for yourself. Don't even take my word for it, as much as I think you should. No, don't take anyone's word for it. Get the facts yourself and see what they have to say. The disabled persons are not committing the fraud that's alleged. The Inspector General, as I mentioned earlier, less than 1% fraud in the system. But you have these 3 or 4 egregious incidents, and let me go on record right now by saying these people should be fried and get the chair. Simple as that. In fact, maybe we ought to bring hanging back in. Anyone who would cheat you, a legitimate beneficiary, out of money that you've legitimately earned and worked for, or someone in your family has, should be hung, in my opinion. There's no question about that in my mind. So I'm not defending these people whatsoever. But when you have 3 or 4 egregious incidents, and that's been since that article hit in May of 11 in the Wall Street Journal. That's where the whole thing started. And there was a judge in West Virginia who was using the SSI program as a social program by approving something like 97% of the people who came in front of him. And he was also playing golf with some high volume lawyer in the area. Now, he was not a bender and bender, but he was high volume for that area. And so the judge eventually resigned, but they never, as far as I know, any charges brought or anything like that. That was just and maybe there was something illegal or collusive about it in nature. I do not know. But the fact is that's where it all started. May 11th, May of 2011, excuse me, I don't control these dates. 2011 was the first article. Then after that, somebody grabbed it, ran with it. Then next thing you had the incidents in Puerto Rico and New York, where they had these, what they call, Social Security calls facilitators. They were actually lining up cops from like 9/11, whatever, and concocting these illegal or lies, whatever, to get Social Security disability evidence that doesn't exist. Okay, and so on. And those people ought to be hung. There's no question in my mind about that. But that wasn't the guy who gets services from SBI or the DOR or collects his monthly Social Security check and tries to live on it. These were crooks. One of the rumors I've heard, now this is a rumor, here's a great example of checking your facts, which I did not do. But I just went with this because I kind of believe it, okay? I mean, it sounds good for someone like me. Planned attacks by those such as Senator Colburn who want to privatize Social Security system. Now, you have to understand, at one point when, this was back when President Bush was president in his first term, he was in favor of privatizing Social Security. I'm not sure that was all bad, by the way, provided they could do it in a way where it wouldn't cut benefits and so on. But the fact of the matter is, it didn't happen. And as a result, there has been a rumor floating around of late that all of this is because those who want to privatize Social Security want to force you and America into the privatization program, which is in addition, and that's why they're willing to cut your checks by 20%. I don't know if that is true. I am giving a biggest disclaimer in the world on that right now. You didn't hear Mel tell you that, because I do not know if it is a fact. Rumor floating around? Yeah. Fact? I have no idea. And certainly nobody is going to admit it who is trying to do you in because he didn't get his way. Although I guess that has been done before. Well, see, but here's the thing. See, if the question is, and I don't want to get into conspiracies and rumors because there's enough of those, but the fact is, this is, the idea is they're paying you back because you wouldn't privatize Social Security by cutting your check 20%. That's the idea. Now, I don't know if that's anywhere near the truth. So please do not quote me whatsoever. Do your own fact checking, and admittedly, I have not done mine. But that's floating around out there. Disability providers, caregivers, survivors, they absolutely have got to contact their congressional representatives. I have called Anna Eschew's office, which is my personal congressman. I have called John Boehner's office in Washington, D.C. as well, knowing that wouldn't do any good, but I did call. And media outlets, I was interviewed by the reporter that covers City Hall and the city government for the Merck last year at a fundraiser. And although I didn't, my opinion didn't quite hit the newspaper, if you know what I mean. But I told her, I said, you know, really, this is what's going on. And why they won't pick up on that, I do not know, unless they're all getting their money from the government. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, well, what's the name of it? Social Security.
Yeah. And, you know, look, I'm not a socialist. I don't believe in socialism. Don't believe in communism. I mean, they just, for one thing, they don't work. You run out of other people's money after a while. But the fact of the matter, this is something that you've paid into, or someone on your behalf has if you were disabled as a child. And so I would really encourage you to get the word out to everybody that couldn't be here or with us on the internet on the webinar tonight, and encourage them to contact their representative and say, hey, what's going on here? I understand you're getting ready to cut our Social Security disability checks. I mean, that's the only way we can put any heat on them anymore is if we can get the darn media off and get them out there and putting pressure on Congress so it becomes all of a sudden a hot item. I knew a representative assemblyman, a state assemblyman years ago, that said when people started calling his office, his aide would come and get him out of committee and say, hey, you better take a look at this. This thing's getting hot in your district. So they do pay attention because their major job is to get reelected. So they do pay attention. With that, I thank everyone tonight for attending. I hope you've gotten some information. Perhaps I have not just given you myths and rumors and lies, but I've given you something to think about and look at and to investigate and do your own fact-checking on. So with that, thank you very much. Have a great evening, and finish off the coffee and the cookies or whatever's over there. Thank you. And I will turn it back to Dr. Stephanie at this point.
Can we ask questions?
No, we're going to turn it over for a few minutes. We're going to turn it over for a few minutes of questions and answers. If you could repeat the questions so the folks on the webcast can hear the questions as well as your answers, I would appreciate that. And also, someone had left these glasses up at the sign-in table. If you are missing these fabulous glasses, let me know. Raise your hand. I'll bring them to you. All right. And then last but not least, please remember, fill out your questionnaires and your surveys for tonight and let us know what topics you want to hear going on in the future. If you're on the webcast, if you could just shoot us a text or shoot Robert an email and let us know if there's topics that you would like to hear. Thank you guys so much. Okay, we'll take just a few questions. I know it's getting a little bit late. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
When your benefits to be reviewed, normally how long ago they would notify you?
Okay, the question is, if they're going to cut your checks by 20%, how much notice are you going to have? I have no idea. I mean, I really don't know the answer, and I doubt if anybody else does. I suspect the media will pick up on it a few months leading into 2017 or whenever it's going to be done, 16, and it'll start showing up in the news outlets. You know, the Social Security checks will be cut starting January 1.
What I meant is not 20%, the whole case going to be reviewed. The entire case and the entire eligibility to be reviewed.
Oh, you're talking about the entire disability fund, or I'm not with you? I'm still not sure I completely follow you. Okay, there's the 20% issue, which we've been talking about. Okay, then your question has to do with
well, the entire benefit, you know, they want to review you, how much ahead of time they would
Well, same thing I just said. The question is how much advance notice would you have on cutting of the benefits, I guess. First of all, they absolutely have to do something by 2016. There's no choice. This is not something that will linger. They are out of money unless they either raise payroll taxes or reallocate between the two funds again. So I suspect toward the end of 2015, or certainly by January 1 of 16, or depending when the cut's going to occur, that the media would start picking up on that. Because that's, I mean, first of all, you're talking about 9 million voters, and not to mention, you know, the folks that would be storming the Social Security offices, you know, because all of a sudden their checks are cut. So there would be some notice. There's no question about that in my mind. Social Security would probably have a duty to send you a letter. You know, and of course they would probably blame Congress, which is probably right, you know, and so on. Okay, any other questions? Yes, sir, in the back. That's you.
With tonight having a big Powerball, you know, over 200 and some odd.
You want to win the Powerball?
Yeah.
What's that got to do with Social Security?
Why do they not say where all that tax money goes? Why doesn't it go into?
Well, I have no idea. The question is, where does all the tax money go? Why aren't we being told from the Powerball lotteries and so on? First of all, that's a state program and has absolutely nothing to do with what we've been talking about. Well, we've been talking about federal programs. Powerball and the state lottery and so on, those are state of California programs, so you need to go see Governor Brown. Any other questions? Well, you let me off the hook easy, thank you. Okay, Dr. Stephanie, I guess it's all yours. We're done? Well, I thank everyone for attending tonight, and it's a great organization with